All right, so I've got this cloned and got it on my local machine, and the server is up and running. So you can start by playing around with it, just making sure everything works. So I can go to opinion, world, national. I can view individual article. So far, this is what it's supposed to be doing. All right, so let's take a look at the README. And we're going to be adding, we're going to be setting up the login, but it won't really do anything yet. What we're going to be doing right now is, we'll be able to add an article. And of course, this is just like a dummy API, but from the front end's perspective, it will work. Okay, so there's some initial stuff about using fetch. We've seen this before. So using fetch to make post requests. So I can copy this, paste it in the browser, just to make sure that this is working. I can see that I get a JSON object back, and it's got some information about the article that I've created. So we can use that. And then there's another example, what happens if we submit a bad request. So this is a bad request, doesn't have all of the data. And so the API is set up, just this particular API is set up in this particular way. So you can see how it responds if you give it an invalid request. So we still get a JSON object back. It just has an error key instead of the information about the article. So we can use that in our application. All right, so the first thing we're going to be doing is adding another function to our articles API, which is going to handle the create. So we can get a lot of this done just by pasting this. So I'm not going to end up using this entirely, but we'll start with that. So this is the function is supposed to be called, where is it? Add article. So add article, go into our API, articles API. And this is going to take an article object, which we'll have to create on our front end. And then when we have that article, we're going to make a fetch request. So I'm just going to paste this in right here just for reference. So I'm going to create this context object first. So all of this stuff here, the optional second parameter for fetch request, I'm going to create that here. And this is going to have, I'll paste this, headers and body. And then right here. So why do we have to use JSON.stringify?
It's only going to accept strings.
Yeah, so we're transmitting stuff over the web, so we can't just send JavaScript objects. So we have to, it's going to get turned into bytes ultimately. So we turn it into a string, gets turned into bytes, gets on the back end, it'll get reconverted into a string, and then it can get processed again using some kind of whatever application. So you don't have to use, you can use anything on the back end as long as it can take a string that has the ability to parse JSON. All right, so here's the context, and then the actual fetch request. We'll make the fetch request to this URL, which is the same as the base URL. So I'm going to get rid of the rest of this now. So from here on out, it should be pretty standard. We've seen this many times. So const response. Base URL, and then we need to pass it the context object that we've just created. So our application is going to need to get information from a form and then turn it into an object, a JavaScript object, which will be stringifiable. So it's going to need to look like JSON. This is JavaScript, so that's easy. And then we're going to make the request, and then we can take a look at what the body of the request is. So the body of the request will be whatever that server returns it. So this JSON object, if it's an error, if it's a bad request, we'll get an object that has an error key. And if it's a valid request, we'll get an object that has information about the article. And then we can just go ahead and return that. So what are we actually returning from this function? What kind of thing are we returning from this function?
The whole object as a JSON string.
Yes, so we will return, but so it's tough to ask this question without answering it. So this, what kind of function is this?
It's async, so are we getting the promise?
Yes, so it doesn't look like it,
We're
but
awaiting it.
we are actually going to return a promise. So this async await wrapper, if we mark this as async under the hood, JavaScript is going to, this function will return a promise. So the async await syntax is nice because it makes an asynchronous function look like a synchronous function, but it will actually return a promise. So this response body will be a promise. So we can't just use it directly. The consumer will also have to be async. All right. So I'm going to assume that this works, and I'm just going to test this in the browser. So add article. And then I'm going to grab in the README, there's an example. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm going to take this article object. I'm going to call the function add article, function we've just written, and I'm going to pass in article object. And we'll see. So I'm going to need to paste the base URL in as well. So now we'll call the function again, and we get a promise, right? So we're returning a promise. And if we want to take a look at the value that we're returning here, I mean, again, we could put this in another function that's async await, but I'm just going to use that then. And so we'll just return this. Actually, I'm going to console log. So here is the article. So we've made a valid request, and so we know that our add article function is working now. Okay, so once this add article function is working, we can move on to the next step. Okay. So release 1 the add article page. So we're gonna have to set up a route. So ultimately we're gonna have an article page, but we'll do this in the order of the README. So we'll add a route to our app. So it has to end in add article. So we'll go to our app and we'll add another route here. And this is going to go to add article. And the component will be, what is it called? Add article page. Yeah, it should be add article page. Okay, so we have this component. We haven't written it yet. So let's go into our pages. We'll add article page. Yes. And I'll just keep it as a class component because everything else is right now. So. All right, and then once I have that that component started, I'm going to go into app and import it. And then that should be working now. Component is not defined, so in my add article page, I will import component. All right, go here. That still works. Go to add article. And now I get the add article page. So the route is now set up and I'm getting the page that I want. So once we have that set up, we're going to add a link on the nav component just to make that easier to access. So we go to the components, app nav. I'm going to add another link here. Yeah, I'll keep that. And 2 is the href. And this will be /add article. Refresh that, go back to the home page. And I have add an article up here in the top right. I go to add article and that redirects me there. So the routing should be good now. All right, let's take a look. So now what we need to do, the main thing that the add article page is going to do is show a form. So we're going to need to create a form. And that form is going to have 3 things. So I'm not going to use a React strap. You're welcome to do that. So yeah, you should have seen other examples of React strap in the previous solutions. So look at title, byline, and abstract. I'm going to go here to the add articles page. And then here I'm going to return a form. Write this in a div. So the form is going to have 3 things. So label, We have to use HTML4 and not for, because for is a keyword in JavaScript. So this will be for title. Copy this. Title, byline, and what was that, abstract? All right, so I've got the labels. So now I'm going to actually get the inputs. And I'm going to make these self-closing tags because React prefers that. So self-closing tag for input, and we'll have a type will be text. Name will be title, and the value. So I'm going to do this a little differently. I'm going to do this the other way, where I'm going to basically have two. Every field will have an on-change event, and then the submit will just take what's in our state. So the value will be this dot state dot title. So I'm going to add all these to state. Title and byline. And abstract. Okay, and then we're going to have to add an on-change handler. So that I'll just call that handle this dot handle change. I'll copy the rest of these. Okay, and then one final input field for the submit. Okay, and I'm going to write this callback function. So handle change. And then here I'm going to have to, because I'm just writing one callback function, I'm going to have to go through and figure out where this is actually coming from. So I'm going to do so these all have names, so I can access that. And then I'm just going to basically set up like a switch statement. So if field is title is, I'll do the same thing. Okay, so I'm making these controlled inputs, and so I'm using this just as a shell for the state in my app, basically. So anytime there's a change, the handle change is going to get called. It's going to check what field is being changed, and then set the state of the appropriate value. And then finally, when the user clicks submit, we'll write a handle submit. We'll prevent the default behavior because we don't want a page refresh with query parameters. So e dot prevent default. We'll prevent the default, and then we're going to call our API. So we need to call this. Let me put this over here, maybe on the side. So we have our add article function over here, and it expects an article object. So we can construct an article object from our state. So I'm going to do let's do title. And byline. And abstract. Okay, so now we have our object here. So we're going to, and we don't have to stringify because our function here that we're passing this information off to is going to take care of all that. So once we have the object, we need to call the function. So add, we'll have to import that. API / Okay, so add article with the article object. So you can do this.
Are you exporting the add article function in your?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So maybe let's throw a console log in there. All right, let's go to add an article. Please submit. And it's still doing the page refresh. So that is not what we want. Yes, okay, so one issue is that where are we? So we haven't actually told the form about our callback function. So on submit, right, refresh this, try it again. And we didn't get the page refresh, and we see that add article is called. So it looks like everything is connected. Are there any questions so far? Okay, so let's take a look at the README again. So we have this form, contains 3 fields, submit button. Okay. Okay, so as far as the callback function logic goes, we ultimately want to show a success message when an article is submitted. So it's not enough to just call this here. We're gonna actually need to call it and then check the response and then display a message depending on the response. So let's go ahead and do that. So const remember, add article returns a promise. So we're gonna have to make this function asynchronous. And we can take a look at the, well, let's just console log first. So all right, go back here, you make a request. And we get that object when we successfully create the article. If we don't fill out the form correctly, we get this error object. So we have let's just say two cases. We could, of course, come up with more fine-grained stuff, but we'll have 2 cases. So if response dot error, so if there's a key called error in the response, then we'll have a message. So the message will be one thing, and if otherwise, if it's successful, we'll have a different message. So let's do that. Well, so if we want to change something based on a user action or something else dynamic, then we're going to have state. So we're going to add a new state here, and this will be so if there's an error, then our message will be we could just we'll just display that message for now. So let's take a look at the article so we can use what we're actually getting. Let's pull the title out. Okay, and once we have this state, this message, we need to conditionally display whatever the message is. We can add something here. And we'll do this dot state dot message. Yeah, actually, there's only going to be one thing. So we'll use the ampersands. Say H3. Okay, so it grabs the title and displays a message. And if we don't do that, okay. So I need to I need to look more carefully at the data that I'm getting back. So error also is itself an object. So error also has a message property, so I'll use that. So .error .message. Okay, so this is just kind of, there are a lot of ways you could do this. This is, but this shows the basic pattern. So if the article is submitted, we do one thing. If it's not submitted properly, we do something else. Okay, so let's take a look. I think this is done. Yeah. All right, so now we're going to set up the login page. So the login page isn't going to do anything yet. We'll do that today for the next challenge, but we'll set up the basic. Okay, so you can create a login page. We'll do that first. Let's go into pages. And I'll make this a class-based component. So I have this page, then we're gonna need to create a route to it. So if we go to our app.js, we'll add another route. And this will be login page. We get the auto import there. So I think that's good. Might as well, let's go to app nav. We'll also add a link. Okay, so you can add an article. We can log in, and our login page doesn't do anything yet. So let's fill in the logic there. So it'll be similar. We're going to create a form. So we'll just go through that process again. Yeah, so we just need username and password. So we'll create that form here. And login page. All right, so the form is going to have two things. The username, oops. And then we'll get the inputs. Make it self-closing. Do name roles. And value. So we'll make this a controlled component. So we'll have this dot state dot username. And we'll add an on change. So this dot handle change. And this is not going to be a text field. I mean, it could be, but we'll make it a password field. Okay, and then we need a submit button. All right, and then this form also needs a handler. So on submit, this dot go submit. So we need to add some state, which will be username. And then password. And we'll write those handlers. So the first one will be the on change handler. So handle change. And we'll do the same thing. So we can have one handler for both of these cases. So const. And then we'll check what we're dealing with. So if field we'll set the state here. It's dot set state. Okay, so now we should be able to type things in. We can check that. Login page. Let's take a look at our login page component. Way down there. So password and username are nothing right now. Type in something, the username changes. Type in password, and the password changes. Okay, so let's write the submit handler. We'll prevent default. And then the README says, this is just, you know, the setup for what we'll do later today, but I think we're just supposed to console log. Yeah, just console log the values.
Is passing the password into state insecure? Like, is that something that we might not want to actually do in practice?
It's going to be there. It's going to be somewhere anyway. So if you have your password in the application, in order to actually get that password, you'd have to. It's in that. There are ways to. I mean, I don't know how to do this, but there are ways to like deconstruct a running program like that. I forget what it's called on Linux. Like if you run out of memory, there's some command. I forget what it's called. Any you security guys know what I'm talking about? Well, basically like it flushes the RAM. Okay, well, never mind. But yeah, so it should be fine from a security perspective. Otherwise, I mean, your password is going to be somewhere, and it's either going to be in the HTML or it's going to be in the application, but this is local. This is all in the user's browser anyway. So we have this. So let's just add something extra real quick. So one reason to use a pattern like this, where we have some level of indirection, where we're having an onChange handler and an onSubmit, we could do things like live validation. We can do checks like username. If so if this dot the value is 5, this dot set state. So password doesn't matter, username, we have to actually display that. So let's go here to the login page and
I think you need to put that in an object. So
thank you.
a second set of curly braces.
So it doesn't do anything, and then usernames. So I would want to you would want to reset it. Let's just do this. This dot set state. So you do something like that. So that's one reason to handle it this way. So I think that's it for the site 5. I think we basically did this. Yeah. So are there any questions about that? Site 5. All right.